Welcome back to our series on modern Indian history for UPSC and all other exams. In last 3 videos, we studied Age of Exploration, discovery of sea route to India and Portuguese expansion India till 1570. After 1570, the Portuguese faced their decline in India. We will study that in this video. Follow our playlist for all videos in the series. Visit our website clarityofconcept.com for summaries and notes. Let's continue from previous video. The late 16th century marked a significant turning point for the Portuguese Empire in India and the Indian Ocean. In 1570, the combined forces of the Sultanates of Bijapur and Ahmednagar, along with the Vijayanagara Empire, launched a major attack on Goa, the administrative capital of Portuguese India. Though the Portuguese successfully defended the city, the assault revealed the increasing vulnerability of their positions and the growing resistance from regional powers. A pivotal moment came in 1580 when the King of Portugal died without an heir, leaving the Portuguese throne vacant. King Philip II of Spain claimed the throne, citing an old maternal lineage, and thus the Iberian Union was formed, uniting Portugal and Spain under a single crown. While this union theoretically consolidated their resources and military strength, it also meant that Spain's enemies now became Portugal's enemies. Spain was already embroiled in conflicts with the English and the Dutch, both of whom were rising maritime powers with ambitions in the global spice trade. Now they also became Portuguese enemies. The English and Dutch, who were previously not focused on Portuguese holdings, began to target Portuguese territories and shipping lanes as part of their broader conflict with Spain. The Dutch, in particular, launched aggressive campaigns to break the Portuguese monopoly on the spice trade. They established trading posts and seized key Portuguese outposts, disrupting the Portuguese trade network. The English, through the newly formed East India Company in 1600, also sought to establish their presence, further challenging Portuguese dominance. Portuguese faced lack of resources as they were also fighting Spain's battle as part of Iberian Union. The Spanish crown, prioritizing its own wars and interests, neglected the needs of the Portuguese colonies. This neglect meant that Portuguese forts and settlements received little reinforcements or supplies, leaving them vulnerable to attacks and economic competition. Additionally, the decline of the sugar industry in Brazil, a major source of Portuguese revenue, exacerbated their economic troubles. Brazil's sugar plantations, once a cornerstone of Portuguese wealth, faced competition from more efficient Dutch and English operations in the Caribbean. This decline reduced the funds available to support Portuguese defenses and trade in the Indian Ocean. The combined effects of external military pressure, internal administrative neglect, and economic decline marked the end of Portuguese dominance in the region. Portuguese inability to adapt to these challenges led to a significant erosion of Portuguese influence by the turn of the century. This period of decline set the stage for the new colonial powers to reshape the geopolitical landscape of the Indian Ocean in the coming decades. There were also religious reasons for the decline of Portuguese. The Portuguese Empire in the Indian Ocean aimed to expand both its trade and its religious influence. Commanders like Vasco da Gama, Francisco de Almeida, and Afonso de Albuquerque were strong advocates for spreading Christianity. This commitment led to the establishment of the Goa Inquisition in 1560, which sought to enforce Catholic beliefs and convert the local population. The Portuguese often combined their commercial and religious goals. They built churches and missions alongside trading posts and forts, reflecting their dual objectives. However, this focus on religious conversion sometimes caused tension with local communities who resisted these efforts. This emphasis on religious goals had significant drawbacks. Resources that could have been used to strengthen economic and military structures were instead directed towards religious missions. This diversion of resources sometimes left Portuguese defenses and infrastructure vulnerable, weakening their position. In contrast, the English who will arrive in later years had a different approach. The English East India Company prioritized trade and economic gain. While missionaries were present, they operated separately from the company. This separation allowed the English to avoid conflicts related to forced conversions and focus on building profitable trade networks. This strategy helped them form better relationships with local leaders. They focused on trade and profit, which made them more stable and successful in the region. This practical approach contributed the English eventually becoming dominant in the area. As the Portuguese were deeply invested in their dual mission of economic expansion and religious conversion, other European powers began making inroads into the Indian Ocean region. The Dutch were among the first to challenge Portuguese dominance, arriving in 1596. They quickly established their foothold with the creation of the Dutch East India Company, known as VOC in Dutch, in 1602. This organization was highly efficient and well funded, allowing the Dutch to build an extensive network of trading posts and forts. The English followed suit with the establishment of the English East India Company in 1600. The English, like the Dutch, were primarily forced on economic gain rather than religious conversion. The French also entered the scene later, founding the French East India Company in 1664, further intensifying the competition for trade dominance in the region. These new European powers brought significant advantages in terms of maritime technology and trade organization. The Dutch and English ships were often faster and more advanced than those of the Portuguese. They also offered more competitive trade terms, which drew local traders away from the Portuguese monopolies. This competition eroded the economic base that the Portuguese had relied on for their dominance. The English and Dutch also avoided the religious entanglements that had often complicated Portuguese relations with local populations. While they did not ignore missionary work entirely, they largely separated it from their commercial activities. This approach allowed them to engage more freely with local powers without the friction that came from aggressive conversion efforts. By the early 1600s, the Portuguese found themselves increasingly outmaneuvered and outcompeted. They could retain control over only a few key territories, including Goa, Daman, and Diu, but their power in the Indian Ocean had largely faded. These regions remained under Portuguese control until 1961, long after their era of dominance had ended. The entry of the Dutch, English, and French reshaped the geopolitical landscape of the Indian Ocean. This shift marked the decline of Portuguese influence as the once dominant power in the region struggled to maintain its former glory amidst the new competition. That's all about the Portuguese. Let's study the Dutch in next video. Follow playlist and visit website for all updates. Subscribe to our channel Clarity of Concept.